I rise today to join my colleagues to speak on my Democrat colleagues' proposed budget resolution, upon which they have just been waxing poetic before the Senate. I am pleased, everybody is pleased, finally, that the Senate has again, finally, taking up its constitutional responsibility to consider a budget in regular order, or at least some framework of a regular order. However, I have the temerity to suggest that after 4 years, this budget resolution does not cut the spending mustard, and from a constitutional responsibility, I fear, has indeed been very irresponsible. At the same time, I look at this budget and I ask, is this all we waited for these past 4 years? In the words of the famous song, is this all there is? Or better put, is this more than all there is? And it certainly is more. Mr. President, there's an old saying, if you want to be remembered by your children, leave a lot of debts. Well, if this budget is passed and it sticks, then there are going to be a whole lot of people who vote yes who will be certainly remembered. The solution was indeed to return to regular order, return to the regular process, examine the President's budget, pass a budget resolution, provide clear directives to the authorizing and appropriation committees to develop legislation to reflect the tough decisions made in the budget. A lot of words, but none of it's very easy. But that's called regular order. That's what we should have been doing the last 4 years. We have not been doing that. We haven't been doing that at all. Everybody knows the process around here. What happens is that we have a major bill to do, we have our obligations to do, we have our constitutional responsibilities to do, we try that, we ask for amendments, we don't get amendments, we file cloture, they don't get 60 votes, and the bill fails. Or we have a continuing resolution, some giant body of legislation that is the worst way to do business, or a sequester, same kind of thing. And people back home scratch their head. People on that side of the aisle perhaps have an issue, not a bill, but they might have an issue, and then the blame game starts, and I think the American people are tired of it. So none of it is easy. I understand that, but it works much better, much, much better than lurching from crises to crises that we have done and experienced in the last 4 years. So I am pleased that we are slowly returning to some aspects of regular order, but I remain deeply concerned, Mr. President, about the daunting fiscal challenges we face and the fact that we are not answering these challenges. The federal balance sheet is now truly frightening. Frightening. Today, almost 1,500 days since we last considered a budget resolution on this Senate floor, we are fast approaching a $17 trillion in debt. And beyond, it's climbing. Our per person share of that debt is now more than $53,000. This is why I am so frustrated. Many of our colleagues are frustrated and disappointed by the budget resolution that we are about to consider. Yes, again, we have brought this resolution through regular order. I appreciate that. But the recommendations fail. They fail. They fail to begin to meaningfully address the key fiscal issues that we all generally agree are sustainable. I don't have a chart, but I think people can understand this. The numbers are stark. Since 2009, we have added nearly $6 trillion to the national debt. Under the proposed budget resolution, despite a massive new tax hike proposal, new debt will rise. Don't have a chart, just sort of imagine it here, $7 trillion over 10 years. And I hasten to add that's on a projection by the Congressional Budget Office, and I think it's probably low. Spending will increase another $645 billion above the projected growth over 10 years, including $162 billion in the next year alone. The deficit will increase in the next fiscal year by $95 billion above current forecasts. Now, I could have a chart with a big zero on it. It's not a soft drink. This is something pretty serious. Zero, that's right, zero real deficit reduction through spending reductions. It would never and doesn't pretend to try and balance the budget, precisely what the senator from Alabama has been pointing out. And in my view, this resolution would further damage our fiscal condition over the long haul, exactly what we don't want to do. We do not want to kick the can down the road any further. Can't do it. We have reached that point of no return. And here's the kicker for me. The budget resolution includes a proposed $1.5 trillion in new taxes. That's on top of the $600 billion tax hike that was just enacted in January. This would include a $923 trillion reconciliation instruction to the Finance Committee. I'm a member of that very prestigious committee. I look forward to try to achieving tax reform, but I worry about a $923 trillion reconciliation, despite the negative impact this would have on critically needed pro-growth tax reform. Now, the budget also includes about $500 billion in unspecified loophole closures to increase spending on infrastructure and to replace the current sequester. Loophole closures. Boy, is that in the eyes of the beholder. And I'm concerned about it. No doubt, the Gatling gun kind of criticisms we heard in the past campaign singling out tax reform targets, and I always want to add, you always want to worry about what lurks under the banner of reform, under whatever banner somebody is waving. Time after time, I heard the president talk about fat cat corporate jets. Boy, am I tired of hearing about that. That's business aviation. That's 1 million jobs. That's a great number of aircraft that's adding to our exports. And the president has said, let's double our exports. And still we hear this pejorative of fat cat corporate jets. And also oil and gas subsidies, two major industries of Kansas. Even though these are critical, successful industries with all the hallmarks we should want in an industry. Good, high-tech paying jobs. Sure, I'm for tax reform. And sure, I want to reach the specified numbers that we could all agree on, if we could all agree on a specified number, but policy counts. And you don't want to do anything terribly counterproductive. Mr. President, the call for a gigantic tax hike to pay for more spending is misguided. It will harm our chances for tax reform. It will do little to place our budget on any sustainable path. Not only that, this budget is a job killer. The Tax Foundation analysis I just read today indicates the legislation in its current form, get this, will result in the loss of 800,000 jobs over 10 years. It's a job killer. Why on earth would we be considering a budget resolution that will result in the loss of 800,000 jobs? In Kansas, that hit would be about 10,000 jobs. That's low. I have no doubt that this number really understates that problem. Now, we all know that the time is long past for us to reform our overly complex, our costly, our anti-competitive tax system. That's a given. We know that. I might add that the Finance Committee, under the chairmanship of Max Baucus and the ranking member's leadership, Orrin Hatch, all of us on the Finance Committee, we've been meeting as Republicans, as Democrats, and then together. We can do this job. Give us 6 months to do it right, give a flashing light at the end of the room saying do no harm. We can get this thing done. The current system is a drain on individual and business resources. It's one of the main causes of our sluggish economic growth. We need to put in place a tax code for the 21st century, one that recognizes the nature of the international trade system in which we compete, and boy, there is competition, and one that recognizes the changes to our domestic business environment. We also need to lower corporate rates so that the U.S. is no longer, or that the U.S. has no longer the highest rate in the developed world. It is critical that Congress encourage economic growth, private sector job creation by putting in place a tax system that is simpler, fairer to all taxpayers, a tax system that doesn't change every year or two, one that provides certainty. And we need to provide certainty, Mr. President, by establishing a permanent tax code that will allow families to plan for their future and give businesses the confidence to expand and create jobs. So adopting a fairer and simple tax system that lowers marginal rates, encourages economic growth, and promotes our competitiveness and eases compliance, read regulatory reform, read a Katrina of regulations that now affects virtually every business endeavor in the country. Read all of that. That's the most powerful step we can take to improve our economy. Mr. President, while I support considering a budget through regular order, and thank goodness we're finally achieving that, we are presented here with a profoundly disappointing document. A budget that includes a massive job-killing tax increase, increases spending, raises the deficit and debt, and all but kills prospects for tax reform. Just what the doctor did not order. After 4 years of deliberate inaction, my colleagues and I had hoped for better. I yield the floor.